Om Parthaya Pradibodhidam Bhagavata Narayanena Swayam Vyasena Grathidam Purana Munina Madhye Mahabharatam Advaitam Radavarshinim Bhagavadim Ashtadashadhyayinim Ampatva Manusandadhami Bhagavad Gita Bhavadveshinim Yam Brahma Varunendra Rudramarudastunandi Divyaistavaihi Vedai Sangapadakramopanishader Gayanti Yam Samagaha Dhyanavastita Tadgatena Manasa Pashyanti Yam Yogino Yasyandam Navidusura Suraganaha Devaya Tasmai Namaha. So we were discussing the first few verses of the 12th chapter, the chapter that deals with the Bhakti Yoga, the path of devotion. So that we are discussing till now. So just to recapitulate the introduction, So Arjuna is asking one question. The student is asking a question to his teacher. Which is the better, the easier and more appropriate, maybe the superior path, the path of the intellect or the path of the heart, the path of thought and contemplation or the path of emotions. In short, one is the path of devotion, which is you think of God who creates this world, who is compassionate, who listens to your prayers, and who takes care of us. Compassionate. This is the most common and the most popular monotheistic idea of God. This is perfectly okay. This is one path. Then there is another path. Those of you who are familiar with Advaita philosophy, non-dualism or Buddhism, especially the Vijnanavada schools, you will understand, say, people who tell you, I don't believe in the idea of a God with a definite form who takes care of the world, who listens to our prayers, who asks you to follow certain do's and don'ts, rules and regulations, who will give you punishment or reward according to your actions in this life. I don't believe in that kind of a God. But I believe in some kind of a higher destiny, higher spirit, higher divinity. That's I accept. Well, that roughly corresponds to the path of the intellect. Jnana Yoga in the traditional Sanskrit terminology. This is perfectly okay. You can find many of the scientists, thinkers, many modern physicists, philosophers, they may not go to a church or a place of worship or a temple or anywhere. But they will live moral life. They believe in some humanistic principles and they believe it is wrong to do harm to another person. And they believe in some kind of a divine reality somewhere. Well, roughly this corresponds to Jnana Yoga. But this is actually not Jnana Yoga. Remember. See, here is a conviction. Here's an idea, a philosophical construct, which is not the same as spiritual experience. These are two different things. A philosophical conviction or belief is very useful, very helpful. At least it guards you against being fanatical in the monotheistic tradition, because there is a lot of scope for fanaticism in monotheism. See, my God, the God whom I understand from my book, or the God who connects with me. So there is a remote possibility of some kind of an exclusivism or fanaticism in all monotheistic devotional traditions. If such a person who follows this monotheistic tradition, he also has got this intellectual conviction, well, there is one divine reality present everywhere. He may not have reached the experience state of this, but he believes, well, there is something like that. That belief, that philosophical idea can guard him against becoming a fanatic. So that is one advantage of it. So this is an important, that's why from a doctrinal point of view, Jains and Buddhists are the least fanatical in the world. If it is said, if a Jain becomes a fanatic, it means she'll be the most non-violent, the most humane person in this world. It's better that he becomes a fanatic. That means a Jaina fanatic with Jainism believes in non-violence. They cannot do consciously, they cannot do harm even to an ant, an insect. They can't do that. So frequently they're very careful when they walk in the streets. They close their nostrils and mouth closed because some bacteria or insects they may breathe in. Now, if such people become religious fanatics, it will be good for the world. The opposite of the other side of fanaticism, which I am not referring to now. So, that is one advantage, because they believe in some kind of a divine reality. They don't believe in a monotheistic creator God who addresses their needs, who talks to them, who are on their side, who has given them a book. They don't believe in that kind of a God. But they believe in practicing certain values like non-violence, truthfulness. You may call it in modern time in a vegan fanaticism. That also is part of the Jaina tradition. So, but the point is, they don't have a transcendental outreach. That's one problem with the Jainism. That's why Jainism in India merged with Hinduism, especially the Hindu Vaishnava tradition, and Jainism came together in the western parts of India, because that's the place where Jains mostly are found. Now, here we are confronting two approaches, which is in a way very universal. After all, if you are a thinking, cultured, educated person, any person, you will be always thinking of something higher other than your food, your clothes, or your shelter, your car. You may be thinking of something higher. That's what actually distinguishes a thinking human being from the animal kingdom. There are two approaches. One, a God who is compassionate, but compassionate towards you, towards your people, towards those who follow his principles, and less than compassionate towards those who don't follow God according to that particular instruction found in that particular book. So this is called the path of Saguna, the monotheistic approach. The other one is the transcendental approach. Arjuna is faced with this question. In the previous chapters of the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna was taught by Lord Krishna a lot of devotion, a lot of philosophy, and a lot of these monotheistic ideas, and a lot of these transcendental ideas. The intellectual and also the emotional ideas. But we call Saguna, with the idea of God with a form, the idea God beyond a form, a transcendental spiritual reality. It's path of jnana, path of knowledge. So Arjuna was a bit confused. As I mentioned in my previous sessions, Arjuna's question is something like this. A primary school student who has done well in his examination, 5th grade or 10th grade, is asking the question, or maybe a kindergarten, a child of 5 years, putting a question to his father, should I join the kindergarten or should I go directly to the university? The father should tell him, you can go to the university 20 years later, but now you go to the kindergarten. So, this is the real answer, but the child doesn't know. Similarly, Arjuna is a child in the field of spirituality. So he's asking this question. In answer to this, Lord Krishna gives a very, very scientific, very rational answer. And the most dominant theme of this answer is that robust humanism, compassion, and universalism. You don't find Lord Krishna talking about one book or one idea of God or one definition of God. Lord Krishna is talking about the journey of all spiritual seekers in the space of spiritual practices. So the answer given is, you can find in the third verse and fourth verse. I shall read that. Yetu aksharam anirdesyam avyaktam paryuvasade sarvatragam achintyam cha kudastham achalam dhruvam samniyam mendriya gramam sarvatra samabuddheha te prapnuvanti mameva sarvabhuta hiterataha. This particular verse, it deals with the path of knowledge. Lord Krishna says, those who are dedicated to this idea of God, of a God who is transcendental, who is beyond name and form, who is an all-pervading reality, they believe they are devoted to this divine spirit, which is sarvatraga, means omnipresent, going everywhere, who is beyond words, thoughts, and contemplation, and who is also present in all of us, and who is the essence of stability. And those who have got full control of their senses, those who have got full control of their mind and thoughts and emotions, they can straight away contemplate on this higher idea of God. It is not lower God or higher God, rather it is a more complete idea of God and a less complete idea of God. At the beginning, as I mentioned earlier, we may believe, well, God listens to us. God is sitting in the temple where I am praying, or a church, or some kind of a place. He is sitting there, and He will be happy if I go to the place every day or every week or perform all the rituals. He will be happy. And He won't be happy if I don't do that. This approach is not wrong. Gita doesn't tell you that any path is wrong. There cannot be a wrong religion according to Bhagavad Gita. There can only be an incomplete path, an incomplete picture. This is an important thing. See, the primary school student gets only an incomplete picture of physics or chemistry or mathematics. The same student, when he is 30 years old, when he is a professor, he gets a more complete picture. But what he learns when he is a professor, when he learns at the university, is only a more complete picture of what he learned in the kindergarten or the primary school. It's not what he learns in the primary school is not wrong, it's only incomplete. That means there cannot be any religion, there cannot be any idea of God that is wrong. It may be incomplete. So Lord Krishna in the third and fourth verse is talking about this path of higher knowledge, contemplation. If you don't want to go to a place of worship, no problem. If you don't want to read a book, no problem. But you should be able to experience divinity everywhere. Then you don't require a temple. The importance, the need of a temple or a church is that you need a place to go. Really, remember, just imagine. You can just imagine. Suppose you do away with all the rituals in the world. There will be total chaos. Just like there will be total chaos, anarchy, if you do away with all kindergartens and primary schools. You won't get professors if you don't have kindergartens or primary schools. You get professors, you get Nobel laureates only when you have good kindergartens and good primary schools. So like that, if a person is fully equipped with sense control, mind is completely under control, such a person can feel the presence of God everywhere. Everywhere. Even doing transactions in a business, when he is treating a patient in the hospital, when he is farming in the field, he can feel the presence of God. Such persons don't require rituals. They don't need to go to any temple. They don't need to read a scripture because Everything in this world is an expression of the divine when you reach that stage. But not before. Not before. Now, the third and fourth verse is talking about this path of the transcendental. It's called Nirguna, Nirakara, Nirvishesha, etc. These Sanskrit terms. It means going beyond certain forms, certain names, certain definitions, certain verbalizations, not without form, not without attributes, but beyond form, beyond attribute. These are also very, very important things. Not without, but beyond. Two different meanings, Some people will be, I'm an Advaitin, I'm a non-dualist, so I won't care for temples. He's not really an Advaitin. He's only an anarchist. A real Advaitin will not mind going to any temple or any church, any place of worship. He won't mind performing the most concrete, the most gross forms of rituals. He won't mind. But he will understand that that is only beginning of the journey. That's all. He won't tell you, you should perform ritual to be spiritual. He will tell you, I can be spiritual without performing rituals, because I go beyond rituals. I don't go against rituals. I do not go against rituals. That's an important point to remember. Going beyond and being in conflict with are two opposite approaches. So this is the higher path. So Arjuna is asking, should I take this path? Because that's very easy. Remember, there is a big possibility of self-deception in the Advaita path, in the path of knowledge. Self-deception, a lot of scope for hypocrisy. People tell you, I don't go to temples, I don't go to churches, I don't read scriptures, I don't have to believe in any of these things. I'm spiritual. Fine. But can he look upon the whole creation as one spiritual family? Can he behave with the humanism of a Buddha or a Christ? Then he has every right to claim that he has transcended rituals. Not before. So this is one approach. The other approach is the normal approach, which is more natural. Like you go to kindergarten, do well, then primary school, then go to some nearby city college, then to university, then you may perhaps become a Nobel laureate. Gradual, graded approach. In fact, that path is described in the second verse. Mayyavesya manoyemam nityayukta upasade saddhaya parayopedaha te me yuktatamamahadaha. Means, you can connect with the all-pervading reality even when you are living in this world, even when you are working in the hospital, even when you are doing work which is normally considered to be secular. Is possible. If you can offer all that you do and also the results of all your actions, and if you remain totally detached. Detached means not having any obsessive attachments, not having any obsessive desires, not being obsessed with selfish motives. With that approach, with that attitude, if a person can practice spirituality, then also gradually, but it's gradual, he can reach this higher stage. So, why these differences? That's to be explained. Normally, when we take to any higher life, any higher spiritual pursuit, we are confronting our own mind. There's a big man, a strong Hulk appearing in front of you, a strong, muscular, maybe your enemy or friend. It is your own mind. You can test yourself. You go to a place and sit and meditate. Immediately, mind feels restless. If you're watching the TV or YouTube or you're reading newspapers, reading a comic, no problem. Computer games, No problem. Mind is perfectly happy and composed. But the moment you sit quiet somewhere and meditate, immediately mind begins to create problems in front of us. Why? Because our mind is a complex mechanism. Our mind is the result of all the actions that we have done in the past, all the words we have spoken, all the experiences we have undergone in the past, not in one life, but in several life cycles. All these will emerge in our mind. They may appear to be friends, they may appear to be enemies. I mentioned this again. I cannot give a better example to illustrate this than referring to Buddha's Jataka tales, because that is the most graphic illustration of this particular aspect of human mind. Buddha started to meditate. There is an interesting verse it's called in Buddha Charitam and Lalita Vistaram. Both are found. The verse is this: Buddha walked almost 1200 miles from his native place Lumbini, Nepal, to Bodh Gaya in the state of Bihar, in today's Patna, and he sat under a tree. Bodh Gaya, today Bodh Gaya, people, the Bodhi tree is still, at least some relic of the old tree is still there. And he sat under the tree with a strong determination. I will not get up from this seat without getting spiritual enlightenment. Ihasane sushyudu me sharidam tugasti mamsam cha vilayam cha yatu aprapya siddhim bahujanma durlabham naivasanat kaya madaschalishyate. This is a well-known verse in the Lalita Vistara. Holy Buddha Charita. So, I shall not get up from this seat without getting this nirvana. And then what happened? One after another, all his previous life cycles began to emerge in his mental horizon. If you read Jataka tales, Buddha's rebirth stories, 543 life cycles. He was born in so many different life cycles. He was born as an intelligent monkey, a monkey king, an elephant, a robber, a great saint, a normal human being. In so many incarnations he went through. Each incarnation, in each life cycle, he displayed some unique characteristic which showed his uniqueness. He was ascending the steps of perfection. It's called Prajna Paramita Stotram. It's well known. It's an important sutra in the Buddhist tradition, Prajna Paramita means the characteristics of perfection. So he was accumulating this perfection in each life cycles. Finally, he was born as Gautama Buddha, and in this life he became the real Buddha, the enlightened one. Now, what does it mean? All the actions we have done in the past, they remain accumulated in the mental system. They become vrittis, vasanas, residual impacts, samskaras, emotions, feelings, tendencies, habits, and so on. And they force us to act or not to act in a particular manner in this life. That's true in Buddhism, that is true in Hinduism, that is true in most of the religious traditions of Eastern origin. Now, all these create a kind of stumbling block. They create what is called karmic blocks. What is karmic block? Karmic blocks are invisible, invisible prison walls. Means, suppose you want to read a wonderful book, and if you are used to reading only books which are not so very desirable, then one day you want to read the Sermon on the Mount, you feel like throwing away that Bible and you feel like reading some comics. Why? Because the mind is creating karmic blockages, obstacles. Your mind won't cooperate with you. You have to force yourself to read the Sermon on the Mount. It's a very small, tiny fraction. It's a great spiritual literature. or Bhagavad Gita, or any holy book, if you try to read, mind won't help you, mind won't cooperate with you. You try to switch on and try to watch some wonderful movie, let us say, the life of Buddha, Sri Ramakrishna, Shankaracharya, Christ, or any great person. No comedy, no scope for excitement. Mind will not cooperate. Why? Mind is not used to watching those things. Mind is full of this accumulated, I don't call dirt and filth, but that would be the right term to call. These are all karmic blocks. These are all samskaras, tendencies, impressions that we also have earned and accumulated in our own mental system. They ask you, stop watching the movie on St. Teresa of Avila and start watching Terminator. And when you start watching Terminator, you are very happy, no problem. Absolutely, you can fully immerse in that. You won't feel the passage of time. I don't know how long it takes, but you won't feel all the three, you can continue. Or maybe there are other wonderful things which I am not so familiar with. No problem. But the moment you watch the story of St. John of the Cross or anything, no, mind will not cooperate. Why? Because mind is accustomed to dealing with things which are not so very conducive, not so very helpful to spiritual life. And what you are used to, what the mind is accustomed to, it wants to accumulate more. That's why very often there's a theory in the ancient Hindu initiation. Initiation is a formal introduction or initiation into education called Gayatri Mantra. When a child is introduced to the study of the Vedas. So, let your mind be your eternal friend. That's the meaning of the mantra. One of the mantras that are uttered in this ceremony. Let your mind be your best friend. Because your mind has to be a friend. And how to befriend our mind? Give your mind good food, and mind will not bite you. Just like dogs. If you feed your own pet dog with stones, it may bite you one day. Not one day, but 2-3 days later it may bite you. If you eat good food, the dog will be happy with you. So the same thing with mind. So the point is here, Lord Krishna says, if your mind is not yet ready to practice this higher contemplation, then what you should do, slowly you should take the graded path. Slowly you should practice rituals, go to the church every Sunday or whatever day, or the synagogue, or Buddhist temple, or Hindu temple, go every day, perform rituals. Because the performance of rituals, being engaged in rituals, have one technical advantage. Your mind will be completely absorbed, or should be expected to be absorbed, when you do something with a sense of sanctity and sacredness. Whole mind will be absorbed. If a person sincerely does puja, then his whole mind will be on the flower that he is taking with his right hand. His whole mind will be on the mantras that he is uttering. His whole mind will be in the act of offering to the Lord. In any ritual, it may be Christian liturgy, any religious tradition, rituals do have an importance. But Lord Krishna says, you have to go beyond rituals, but you cannot wish away your own mental karmic blocks. So to slowly sublimate your own mind, sublimation of emotions and feelings and thoughts, is the first royal highway to the path of devotion, sublimation. Giving a lift, giving a promotion. For that, Lord Krishna says, Maya Vesha Manoyemam Nityayukta Upasade Saddhaya Paraya Upeta. Saddha means, you know what is Saddha? Every spiritual seeker who follows this graded path of sublimating his emotions and feelings and gradually removing karmic blocks, he needs to cultivate one unique psychological quality. It is called Saddha. Saddha, Vivekananda says, there are a few words in Sanskrit which cannot actually be translated into a single English word. Shraddha is one such word. Shraddha can mean honesty, sincerity. When you identify yourself completely with an act that you are doing, with a word you are speaking, then you have Shraddha. This complete integrity, honesty, sincerity, total identification, that is very important. When we have that quality, then this graded path, slow, steady, gradual path, will one day take us to the highest spiritual realization. This is the answer given in the second verse of the 12th chapter, with regard to those who follow the path of the Saguna, means the idea of God as a monotheistic creator God with the names and forms and attributes. And when a person reaches that stage and perfection in that form of spiritual practice, one day his mind will be completely under his control. His senses will be completely under his control. His senses mean senses of action, senses of perfection. Eyes, ears, the sense of touch, sense of smell, sense of taste, all will be under control. When that happens, your mind will be your best friend. When you reach that stage, your own mind won't permit you to do anything wrong. Now, our religious scriptures make an important statement. With that, I should conclude this part of it. How do we know we are on the right track in spiritual life? How do we assure ourselves that we are actually on the right track? It's very interesting. When something goes wrong, when we do something unconsciously or consciously, do something wrong or speak something wrong, our own mind will give a red flag. We feel, I should not have done it. So a spiritual seeker will develop a self-correcting mechanism in his own mind. That's the first sign that you're on the right track. No one can be totally free from mistakes. But after committing mistakes, you will become aware of the fact that you have made a mistake. This can happen again. Again you may commit mistake. But every time when you commit a mistake, your own mind will tell you you have made an error, and gradually you will be able to get this direction before you commit a mistake, and that's how we evolve. There will be no mistakes at all. So this is what happens to a great spiritual seeker. A great spiritual seeker also commits mistakes. But he'll be aware, maybe not at the time of doing, but later, that he's made a mistake. That means there is always an opening for him to get out of this habit of making mistakes. This is called the path of sublimation. All our emotions and feelings are sublimated, given a higher lift. Then in the fourth verse, which is, of course, I have fifth verse. We have finished fourth verse. Kleshodhigadarastesham avyakta asakta chedasam avyakta hi gadir dukkham dehavadbhihi avapyati. The simple point, what are the challenges that the mind puts forward in front of you? If you directly follow the path of the higher path of knowledge and transcendental meditation, suppose you want to be an Advaitin straight away, what's the problem? And Lord Krishna says, Dehavadbhihi avapi. Deha means those who have got the feeling, I am this body-mind complex. Those who have their strong identification, those who identify themselves with the body and mind. And of course, the empirical environment. Those who identify themselves, all normal people, all beginners in spiritual life. Not just beginners, even those who are slightly advanced also belong to this category. Because they are still prone to identify themselves with their body-mind complex mechanism. For them, the path of knowledge, the path of devotion to this transcendental, all-pervading divine reality, the path of Advaita, is extremely difficult, almost impossible. Kleshaha adhikatara means much more. Actually, it's only understatement. It is impossible. Not only that, it leads to self-deception. There's always a problem is there, Sometimes we have this problem. All spiritual seekers face this problem. We read a book and we're highly impressed. We are highly attracted. People who read some advanced books on Advaita, like Yoga Vasishtha, tells you, you are not this body, you are not body-mind complex, you are the all-pervading, divine spark. You are Brahman, you are God, you are nothing less. Now, after reading this book, it looks wonderful. It means I don't have to practice any self-discipline, I don't have to practice any self-restraint, I don't have to practice any sense control, because I am Brahman, I am God, I am divine. This is a terrible self-deception. Frequently, this has led to many misunderstandings. It means misinterpreting Advaita as an intellectual construct, misrepresenting Advaita as an idea and as a concept. No. Shankaracharya says, understanding Advaita as a philosophical construct, as an idea, is very good, wonderful, but remember, that is only the beginning of your journey. That's an important thing. So you have boarded a car going to Sacramento. It takes 2 hours. When you have just stepped into the car, you have not reached there. Suppose and I'm in Sacramento, it doesn't work really. That is true. So an intellectual conviction helps you, no doubt, but it is totally different from the real experience. And Shankaracharya, the original exponent of Advaita, repeats again and again, Srutya, Yuktya, Swanabhutya. You read a book, listen to lectures, and you can be highly impressed by a great idea. And then, what you should do? You should practice some sense control, self-discipline. Make sure that your mind goes in the right direction. You can test ourselves. Suppose you read, and I don't want to mention names, during the post-war time, this became a fashion, unfortunately, in US and also in European countries. Great Advaitic ideas, great ideas. Don't follow anything. You are that one, all right. Now, then this is okay, wonderful, problem solved. There is a great self-deception. An idea is not the same as an experience. You have to travel some distance from an idea into an experience. This is an important point to remember. So, be impressed by a great idea and then start practicing spiritual disciplines. I tell you something very funny. Shankaracharya is the one who developed Advaita into a compact metaphysical system. He was the one who formulated a logic, an epistemology, a metaphysics for Advaita philosophy. But for him, there will be no Advaita philosophy at all in this way. Advaita ideal is as old as Vedas, going back to 4th millennium BC. But the philosophy took its final shape only in 8th century AD with Shankaracharya. And he was the one who constructed the great philosophical system. In his books, if you read, it's so dialectical. If you just, I don't want to exaggerate, I may sound like exaggerating. If you read Critique of Pure Reason, and then if you read Shankaracharya's Brahmasutra Bhashya, you can see the contrast. I mean, there is no way to compare. It is so dialectical, so polemical, so totally idealistic. No question of praying to a god or worshipping a god, or anything, nothing. He's always talking about one all-permanent reality. Brahma Satyam Jagat Mithya Jivo Brahmaiva Nabra. Brahman is only absolute reality. And Brahman means when you reach the highest stage of your spiritual evolution, you experience this divine reality as one divine spirit present everywhere. This world is only a relative, a phenomenal, an illusion. Illusion is not total absence of anything. Illusion is only an appearance. This is his theory. The same Shankaracharya wrote the most profound, the most moving devotional poems in Sanskrit language. 65 devotional poems. If you read them, you may, if you are a Christian, straight away you go and pray to God nearby church and pray. If you are a Buddhist, immediately you will start your prayer wheel or whatever it is. If you are a Vedantin, then you will start meditation. That is the power of his devotional poems. And he is talking about this monotheistic, compassionate God, not about Brahman. Why? And he built all the temples in all over India. You know, in the Vedic literature, there were so many deities. Agni, Mitra, Varuna, and so on. Indra, and so on. He organized all these deities into 5 central deities. So he is the great pantheon maker. Adityam Bigam Vishnum Gananatham Maheshwaram Panchayajnavaro Nityam Grihastha Panchapujayi. Every householder in his home, he should worship these 5 deities. The one who expounded Advaita Vedanta, he is asking you every day you should worship God in your home with an image. Why should he ask you to worship God every day and pray to him, chanting the devotional poems, if he believes in the highest Advaita ideal? The reason is this. You have to travel the distance from a conviction to an experience. So to cover the distance from an idea to an experience, you have to practice rituals, meditation, prayers, and also karma yoga, doing good things. Slowly, as we evolve, you will reach this experience level. That's why Lord Krishna says, anyone who mistakes Advaita or the highest idealistic concept of God, that is Avyakta Asakta. Avyakta means the unmanifested, the all-pervading reality. If somebody starts practicing God as the all-pervading, unmanifested reality and mistakes that reality as just a conviction, as an idea, and doesn't practice other spiritual disciplines, he is going to face a big problem. It can lead to self-deception. It can lead to some kind of hypocrisy and self-deception. I can give an example. During the post-Second World War times, many teachers came from India, and also many emerged here recently, who talk about Advaita, saying that you don't follow anything. Only this, you are that. It doesn't become like that. Just like kindergarten boy suddenly tells, one day he stays, oh, no, I have reached Oxford, I have reached Stanford, I have Harvard. He is not reached there. He is on his way to kindergarten, 1 mile away from his home. If we just imagine that he has reached Stanford, it's not fact. So this is an important Avyakta Asakta Chesam. Avyakta hi gadir dukkham dehavadbhi avapidi. Those who have a feeling of their identification with their body, mind complex, they should always try to practice spiritual disciplines, moral disciplines. Yamas and niyamas means non-violence, truthfulness, contentment, purity. All these virtues they must practice. That will help you to sublimate your emotions and feelings. This sublimation of emotions and feelings and thoughts. These are technical, practical step in all spiritual discipline. This is what you're actually doing. When you go to a library and read a wonderful book, actually you are sublimating your intellectual ideas, your emotions and feelings. You cannot do anything noble. You cannot read anything noble. You cannot read or do anything which elevates your mind without sublimating feelings and emotions. That's why Lord Krishna says, those who have got called Dehatma Buddhi, that is a Sanskrit, it means a person who believes, I am this body. If I believe I am this body, the world is real. And then my senses are not within my control. Because a person who identifies himself with the body and mind complex, it shows that his senses and mind are still very much at this empirical world, and he has to practice self-restraint, sense control, and gradually he has to sublimate his feelings and emotions to a higher level. After this, the sixth and seventh verse, Yetu sarvani karmani maya sanyasya matparaha anannena iva yogena mam dhyayante upasate. Dhyayanta means dhyayante, that's a sandhi, the vowel sound becomes the grammatical root. So the point is, those who do their duty, secular and spiritual duty, those who actually do their secular duties as if they are spiritual responsibilities, treating a patient in the hospital, teaching in a university, do farming, cleaning your own home, trash cleaning as we do, all this can be done as a spiritual activity. So the gap between the spiritual and secular disappears, and then everything becomes spiritual. First, it's a gradual process. At the beginning of our spiritual life, we often define certain activities as spiritual and certain other activities as secular or non-spiritual, natural. That's the beginning. But remember, that's again the kindergarten. As we advance further, we are able to see even secular activities as if they're spiritual activities. And slowly we are able to do even secular activities as spiritual activities. You can see in your own form, a mother taking care of a child. Or sometimes children taking care of their parents. In human relations, when you transcend the ordinary utilitarian mechanical formalistic level, you are reaching another level. You transcend the mechanical level, there it becomes almost spiritual. So even human relations can have the spiritual dimension. So also human actions can be spiritual. I can give an example. Anyone, those who have done great duties, performed responsibilities, taking great risk without caring for their own benefits. Actually, what they are doing their work not as an utilitarian activity, a spiritual activity. If it's not utilitarian, it is less utilitarian, it is slightly spiritual. So gradually you find this evolution where every work becomes spiritual. Every work slowly becomes worship. And then all that we do become an act of worship. That's what Lord Krishna is referring to in the 6th verse. Yetu sarvani karmani maya sanyasya matparaha. Those who perform all their duties and responsibilities dedicated to me, keeping me in their mind, and those who dedicate, they offer their duties, and also the fruits of their work, their duties, anannena iva yogena mam dhyaya, without any distraction, without any the mind going elsewhere, they are always focused on me. So this is the gradual evolution for every spiritual seeker. The first stage, the kindergarten in our life is, whatever we do, it's not just worshipping in a temple or a church. Whatever we do, we can just make it less utilitarian, less mechanical, and proportionately, as it becomes less and less mechanical and less utilitarian, our own obsessive attachment to the results of work becomes less and less. It becomes more and more spiritual. Finally, every act becomes an act of worship. This is a gradual evolution. This, you can find that great men and women in all traditions who have transcended, not necessarily without any, not necessarily as a philosophical ideal, but gradually as an inevitable part of their spiritual evolution. Those are transcended from the utilitarian approach. Every act becomes an act of worship. That's why Lord Krishna is actually drawing the picture of our own spiritual journey. No matter what tradition we belong to, whether we are believers in God or not, in fact, this is possible even to those who are agnostics. I often give the example. Why I give this example? Buddha is a classic example. You can't quote him enough as an illustration of a person who formally did not accept a creator God, became so spiritual in everything he did in his life. So you can find his whole life was a glorious illustration of everything he did as an act of worship. So we can have interaction. You are most welcome with questions. Most welcome.
Hello. My question is, if we're here and we are seeking Vedanta, but we're still far from Sacramento, as you would say.
They're still?
You're still far from Sacramento. You're still very far. You're still very much beginning of the journey.
Yeah.
Perhaps you've seen glimpses, but you're pretty far from being able to see Vedanta or Brahman all the time. Can you worship Brahman directly, or does it need to be a form? Does it need to be one of the personalities?
Yeah. The only discipline in the path of knowledge that is identifying Brahman is vichara. Vichara means contemplating, reminding ourselves again and again that we are not this body, etc. But remember, this should be accompanied by selfless action, karma yoga. Karma yoga is a natural characteristic of the most advanced spiritual giants as well as the beginners. The beginners have to do it consciously because we are normally accustomed to doing everything with a definite purpose, a definite sense of goal and purpose in mind. So that's our normal practice. So for a beginner, you may have to slowly keep in mind, well, I should do everything with a sense of sanctity and sacredness, but without a selfish motive. Without a motive, we may ask, can we do anything without a motive? If you feel if I cannot do without a sense of motive, then offer whatever you do for the good of the world. So that should be always practiced. It's almost like boarding the bus, the train. See, if for a sincere person, boarding the bus is as good as reaching the goal. Maybe in Vedanta, maybe in this life or next life, when you are really boarded the bus which is going to Sacramento, there is no question of you are not reaching there. You will reach there. So karma yoga is the most assured path. Not only that, anyone who is interested in Vedanta, even as an ideal, even an intellectual curiosity and inquisitiveness will help you to practice Karma Yoga. Karma Yoga is the natural habit of an advanced spiritual giant like Buddha or Christ or anyone, or Gandhi and others. And at the same time, it is a conscious practice for a beginner. That's the important thing. You can see this happening. You can, any great man, any spiritual perspective, unselfishness and a sense of sanctity and sacredness. That's a natural characteristic of a spiritual seeker. For an advanced spiritual person, this becomes second nature. For a beginner, this may require conscious effort. And it gives us great joy, if I can really speaking. A great joy. I've seen this happening to many people. They enjoy every moment of their life. Because the practice of what you call detachment. Detachment in the Vedantic sense should be clearly understood. Freedom from obsessive attachment, obsessive desire. That is the real implication of detachment in Vedanta. That gives us a great sense of relief, great sense of joy. Yeah. Think of a world in which you can live without a thought. That's what it really happened, that's what really means in real life. Yeah.
So you spoke of the importance of sincerity earlier. And in relation to karma yoga, it seems really difficult sometimes to try to be sincere with the idea in mind that you're going to do something selfless. Sometimes it feels as if sincerity is something that just happens spontaneously, and when one tries, it actually is hard. What can you say of that?
In fact, your question is very natural and very... In fact, your question, Lord Krishna... he presupposes, he perhaps anticipates a question from you. From the 8th verse to 11th verse, there are 4 verses. We gives 4 levels of practice of spiritual discipline in a descending order. See, Mayeva manadatsva mai buddhim nivesya nivasishisi mayeva ada urdhanna samsya. 8th verse. Now, 8th verse means, what it is, actually this is a picture of the highest spiritual man, let us say. Those who are highly advanced in spiritual life, their mind will be always focused on me. Everything will be dedicated to me. They live in me and I live in them. Lord Krishna says, God says. Now, in the 9th verse, an alternative. If we can't do that, how can we always think of God when we do our work? So that God lives in our hearts and we live in God. Not possible. So in the 9th verse says, Atha chittam samadhadum na shaknoshi mayi sthiram abhyasa yogena tato mami chaptum dhananjaya. 9th verse, an alternative. If you can't do that, slowly you practice. So what do we practice? I explained in the previous session. You read books, think of God, remember Him, listen to hymns, chant hymns. You can perform rituals. All this you can do. And then gradually you find you will start thinking of God more and more often. The 10th verse, a third alternative is given. Abhyasepi asamarthosi markarma paramo bhava madartham abhikarmani kuruvan siddhim avapsyasi. Suppose you cannot practice this You cannot go on reading, you cannot chanting, you cannot performing rituals, you can't do that. Then you know what you do? Do whatever you want in your own way and think that it is my work, God's work. Okay? 10th. 11th verse, that he comes down to the beginner, the earliest, the first stage of spiritual evolution. Atha etatapi ashaktosi matkum kartum madyogamashyudaka sarva karma phalatyagam tatah kuryadatma. This is the 11th verse of the 12th chapter. So please remember, if you can remember, you can play again, then you can see the translation, you can read the book. In the 12th chapter, from the 8th verse to 11th verse, 4 verses, Lord Krishna gives in a descending order 4 alternatives for spiritual practitioners. First stage is always live in God, and God will live in you. And do everything with full focus on God. Then the 9th verse, not easy. Then slowly you practice again and again. 10th verse, that also is difficult. Abhyasebi asamarthosi. Even if you cannot practice this, what you should do? Do everything. If you are a hospital medical doctor, do your work. If you are a factory worker, do that. If you are a teacher, do your work. Whatever may be, think that it is God's work, not your work. I mean, you are drawing the salary. The paycheck comes to you. But in the mind you should think it is God's work. So that gives you a sense of sanctity, sacredness, what you call shraddha, integrity. And when you do anything with a sense of sanctity and sacredness, it has a qualitative effect on the mind. I can give you any example. Suppose you take a book casually, like a novel or whatever it is, stories, some thriller, something you take. You may read somewhere in easy chair, maybe sitting coffee shop or drinking something. You may drink thriller. I've seen people reading these great things in planes and all that. Spend time airports and all that. They will be sitting in relaxed mode. It's not a great sanctity and sacredness they are not reading. But suppose you read something, let's say, more sensible, something that gives you some message in your life, and you do that with a sense of seriousness, integrity, identification. In fact, that reading itself will produce a spiritual effect on your mental system, really speaking. It's a fact that one can demonstrate in any psychological laboratory. So, and then Lord Krishna's last alternative is, then don't worry. Don't worry about any worship or detachment. Don't bother about it. Do everything. If you are a farmer, do your work. If you are working the Trader Joe's, do your work. Whatever it is. Then, when you come back to your home, mentally offer everything to the Lord. That anyone can do. You won't lose your salary. You get all the advantage of you doing your work. And you need not you need not bother about practicing spirituality when you are doing the work. But after doing the work, sarva karma phalatyagam tatah kuryatatmavan. See, atha edadabhya shaktosi kartum madhyogamasidaka sarva karma phalatyagam. Lord Krishna says, if you cannot do any of these, do all your work, and then after having done your work, reach your home, sit in your chair, mentally offering to God. That anyone can do. Once a person starts practicing this, at some point of time, he will start thinking of God even while doing work. Not just after the work is over, but even at the time of doing the work. So you can find from the 8th verse to 11th verse, in a descending order, 4 alternatives. So you have to start reading 11th first, then 10th, then 9th, then 8th, which is more advanced stage. So it's almost like, this you can keep in mind, these 4 verses of the 12th chapter Bhakti Yoga, 8th, 9th, 10th and 11th. The 11th verse corresponds to the first stage, the kindergarten, the beginning, the kindergarten of spiritual life. The 10th one may be primary school. The 9th may be a master, so to speak. And the 8th one, the PhD or whatever it is. That's what it is. So in a descending order is given. So one should read like this. A beginner should read 11th. After some years you can practice what is mentioned, the 10th, then 9th, finally the 8th. So you can find this. This 12th chapter is very, very interesting. There are a lot of wonderful ideas. There are some of the ideas mentioned, for example, who is a spiritual man, who is a true devotee. Lord Krishna doesn't say you should be praying to God, humble, I'm not. No, submission, nothing. Those who are always contented. Those who are friends of everyone. No enemy. Everyone is friend. Sarva bhuta hite rataha. Those mind, thoughts and feelings and emotions are always focused on the welfare of everyone else. Everyone including himself. These are given as the characteristics of a spiritual man, of a devotee. So it is so universal. Okay? Yeah, thank you. So we will conclude today, and we will have the next session the coming Friday. Thank you. Namaskar. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Rama Krishna Arpanamastu.